So for this inquiry activity, I had my husband teach me a history lesson in Serbian, which he is fluent in, and I have next to zero knowledge of. Like, I legitimately know 3 words, 2 of which I learned during the lesson. They are good, yes, and no. That's it. So I really, really was coming in from nothing. And I chose a history lesson because I am going into history teaching, and so I thought it would be helpful for me to experience a lesson like the one that I'd be teaching in the future to my students. Going into this, I expected that I would zone out a lot, that it would be really easy to just kind of like lose focus since I had no idea what was going on. And it definitely was. It was pretty easy because, again, no comprehension. Um, I was like pretty focused trying to figure out what he was talking about and like pick out any kind of words that I could recognize. I imagine most students would probably get tired, especially, during a 7-hour school day of focusing like that. So it was probably better for me during this shorter lesson. Um, that is a problem that I've noticed in the schools that I've been observing and helping in, that these English language learning students are having, is it's just easy to just, entirely disengage and stop trying because it is frustrating for them. So I really sympathize with that. Um, One realization I had is just how easy it is to get false information when you don't understand what the teacher is saying. Um, for example, when my husband was talking, I was pretty sure that he was talking about like the American Revolution because I heard like the words British and um, I recognized like independence, and so picked that out. Um, but at one point I heard a word that sounded like China, and then another time I heard something that sounded like samurai. So, I was like, for me, it very well could have been something in Asia, or China's involved in the American Revolution. They had samurai soldiers. Like, as a, middle schooler, like, I could be thinking anything at that point. Um, so I think that is something that I hadn't considered that probably happens with a lot of students is, they think that they're understanding what the teacher's telling them, but in reality they're not at all. So there really needs to be a way to check their comprehension and be able to help them and fix those errors that will happen. I think I had some advantages over typical ELL students. One, English is like a, fairly common lingua franca. And so because he was teaching a subject in Serbian, he had to use several English words that there weren't really Serbian translations for. British, parliament, representation, stuff like that. So I was able to pick out some keywords that helped me orient myself, and that really wouldn't be the case for someone who only speaks Spanish in an American classroom. Not really very many Spanish words that we use. So that was one thing. And also, I knew the subject. I'm majoring in history, so I know just about all the history topics there are that he could have shared with me. And so, again, it was easier for me to orient myself and have a general idea of what he was at least trying to teach me. And as a middle school history student, they wouldn't. They wouldn't know just by the words parliament and representation, like, oh, we're talking about the Boston Tea Party. That wouldn't be the case for them. So that was another area where I felt like I had an easier experience than they would. One disadvantage I think I had was that he was just talking, just straight talking. And in a typical classroom, you'd have, writing on the board, worksheets. So maybe other tools or ways for them to pick out the information. And I think for a lot of people, it's easier when you pair reading with listening for dealing with an unfamiliar language. So that is an important resource. I guess something for teachers to consider is do try to provide as many ways as possible to help students learn, so that when there are students, who aren't as familiar with the language, they are most likely more comfortable with reading than just listening. Some of my takeaways beyond what I've already said is I think it's important to give students resources in their language, especially the ones that um, maybe just got here or have very limited English skills. Um, I've heard some teachers say that the schools tell them not to give students any language resources, only interact with them in English so that they learn faster. That doesn't seem like the most effective strategy to me. I think they'll learn faster if, for Spanish students, we give them like side by side, maybe some words translated in Spanish, or, a worksheet in Spanish and English, something so that they can figure out what's going on. And we can start on their level and help them gradually learn, rather than expect them to just instantly understand all of this difficult vocabulary in English. I think it's also important to be patient and continue working with them and providing accommodations, because it will take them time, and they need to be able to trust the teacher and have a good relationship with them. I think that finding some way to communicate with them and establish that relationship is super important, so that they will continue to be engaged and try in your class, and you can help them better. So those are my takeaways from this. It was definitely an interesting experience.